something that I would need later, and we're bringing it up.
Was convicted of a heinous crime, intentionally starving her helpless stepdaughter and burning the child's body.
I want to cry right now. It's just a lot. It's just a whole lot.
One was outrageously or wantonly vile, horrible.
And she says she will not eat until her son turns himself in.
Of her own child, and then chasing that child out in the street like a dog and shooting her 5 times, I believe it was.
The court further finds that it would impose these sentences irrespective of whether one or more of the aggravators.
Also, Marlon, if you're out there and you want to call these agents directly to turn yourself in.
At the same time,
killings all began like this. A middle-aged man pulled over to pick up Lee Wernos.
A different person than she was in 1983, and it's if you sit down with Carla Faye Tucker, it's very difficult not to be touched by her.
I can't even comprehend what Bobby's family went through.
Tissue that was found on the gun was an exact match to the tissue that I had submitted to the lab.
Call it death row?
No, we call it life.
Parents who brutally tortured child reacts to death row sentence. This woman was responsible for one of the most horrific cases of child harm ever seen, a heart-wrenching and disturbing case that ended in the demise of a little girl. Tiffany Moss is Georgia's only female and row inmate, and for good reason. Let's dive into her disgusting crimes. The little girl. To know this story, one must first give justice to the victim, Imani Gabrielle Moss, who deserves to be remembered much more than her cruel slayer. Imani was born on April 23, 2003. Tragically, shortly after Imani's birth, her mother, addicted to drugs, surrendered her parental rights, and Imani's father, Eman, gained sole custody of her. Imani was one of 5 children born to her mother, and her mother actually surrendered parental rights to all of her children. But her father was not a far better option. In fact, Iman was charged with and convicted of battery and second-degree child cruelty in 2004 after beating Imani's biological mother in front of her. No self-respecting man would beat a woman to prove his point or show dominance, and consider the fact that witnessing parents fighting, particularly when it escalates to physical violence, can cause significant emotional distress and trauma to children. So he perpetuated emotional violence and trauma on Imani as well. Children are highly sensitive to their parents' emotions and can easily become frightened, anxious, or develop feelings of helplessness in these situations. Parents serve as primary role models for their children. When children witness their parents engaging in violent or aggressive behavior, they learn that such behavior is acceptable or even expected in relationships. This will eventually perpetuate a cycle of violence, leading to long-term negative consequences for the children as they grow older. Although Imani never even got to reach that point, her life was snuffed out far before her time. Evil stepmother. Iman largely raised Imani and often took her to the Freedom Christian Church. There, he met Tiffany Moss, a preschool teacher. Iman and Tiffany married in July of 2009 and had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Though there are no records indicating that Tiffany harmed her biological children, she did harm Imani. The harm increased in March 2010 after a beating of Imani caused Moss to lose her job. Imani, then age 6, told a school nurse that she feared going home with a bad report card because she worried her parents would hurt her. She also told the nurse that her stepmother had spanked her with a curtain rod. The nurse then found multiple scabs, bruises, and welts on Imani's arms, back, chest, legs, and shoulders, and Imani was taken to police headquarters. Tiffany was arrested and charged with first-degree child cruelty. Tiffany admitted to hitting Imani 3 times after she failed to do her homework. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years of probation as part of Georgia's first offender program. The Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, GDFCS, signed the plea deal. The GDFCS dismissed the case against Tiffany and Iman after they completed parenting classes. After the March 2010 beating, Imani was taken from her father and stepmother's home and placed with her grandmother, Robin, staying with her for about 6 months. During this time, Imani's school performance improved. Iman fought for custody of Imani, and in the fall of 2010, the GDFCS returned her to him. Robin fought to retain custody of her granddaughter. Though she suspected Imani was being harmed, she could not persuade authorities to give her custody.
That's right, Sharon, and Robin tells me she has not slept well since this trial ended.
I want to cry right now. It's just a lot. It's just a whole lot.
Having a hard time, very hard time, because he's seen a lot of stuff that was going on in the house.
Prosecutors later argued at trial that the March 2010 harm incident launched an escalating cycle of more harm that ultimately resulted in Imani's demise. Because Moss had pleaded guilty to beating Imani, she was no longer allowed to teach preschool. This made her resent Imani as she blamed her for the job lost. Moss continued to harm Imani for the next several years. In July 2012, Imani twice tried to run away from home. In one case, she went to the apartment office and told them she wanted to run away because Moss had tied her up with a belt and placed her in a cold shower. The police responded and were told by Moss that Imani was not telling the truth. Because there was not enough evidence to charge anyone, Imani was returned to Iman and Moss. In another July 2012 incident, Imani ran away and was found sleeping in the bushes of a nearby apartment complex by a police officer. Imani told the officer that she had run away because her stepmother was mean to her. The officer reported the event to the GDFCS and filed runaway and curfew violation charges against Imani to ensure she would see a juvenile court judge. From 2011 to the summer of 2013, the Moss family moved around, sometimes living with family. Iman, who worked long hours, did not see his daughter often. He later reported at trial that she would eat a lot when he saw her on the weekends when he was in charge of the children. When the Mosses lived on their own, Imani rarely saw extended family. In May 2013, the Mosses visited Iman's sister Sharanice's house for Mother's Day. Sharanice and Robin noticed that Imani's hair had been cut. When Robin confronted Moss about it, Moss reportedly said, quote, "If you act ugly, you should look ugly." Sharanice also noted that Imani acted more timidly. After the 2012-2013 school year ended, Iman and Moss announced that they would pull Imani from public school and homeschool her. Sharanice objected to the idea and called the GDFCS asking them to intervene. Still, they declined. On August 6, 2013, the GDFCS received an anonymous tip that Imani was being neglected by her father and stepmother and appeared to be thin. According to a lawsuit against the GDFCS filed by Robin, the GDFCS did not visit the home and did not conduct a follow-up due to having no current address and no current maltreatment.
It'd be something that I would need later, and we're bringing it up.
So, for example, under the Putnell decision and the procedure that they put forward,
particularly since it's sight unseen.
Can you put something in writing? One was outrageously or wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman in that it involved depravity of mind of the defendant.
A heart-wrenching slaughter. Mother's Day, the 12th of May, 2013, was the last time any members of Imani's family, besides her father, stepmother, and siblings, saw her alive. In the late summer of 2013, Iman, Moss, their children, and Imani moved to an apartment in Lawrenceville, Georgia. According to District Attorney Danny Porter, this was when, for all intents and purposes, Imani vanished from the face of the earth. During this time, Iman worked 2 jobs, making him largely absent from Imani's life. He would leave for his first job in the early morning, briefly return in the late afternoon, and then leave for his second job around 6 p.m. before finally returning at around 10:30 or 11 p.m. While Iman was at work, Moss was left to care for the children. At some point, Moss began to starve Imani. According to prosecutors, the starvation likely lasted several weeks. During this time, Imani was confined to her bedroom. Neighbors only saw Moss's biological children and did not know they had an older sister. Imani eventually became too weak to move and could not leave her bed, urinate, or defecate. Though Moss denied food to Imani, she did take care of and feed her 2 biological children. On several occasions, she sent Iman pictures of meals she had prepared for her children, and in another instance, she asked her husband to bring home cookie dough so she could bake. At trial, prosecutors pointed out that Imani would have to have smelled the baked cookies as she lay in her room starving fatally. According to Dr. Staffenberg, the medical examiner who testified at trial, the process of starving would have been painful. At first, Imani would have experienced hunger pangs, then she would have become fatigued. She would continue losing energy and weight until she ultimately perished. In the early evening of October 24th, Imani suffered what Iman believed was a seizure. Iman testified that when he came home, Moss told him something was wrong with Imani. He then went into the bathroom and found his daughter in the bathtub shaking. Imani was unresponsive and her eyes were rolling back and forth. Iman moved Imani to her bed where she stayed for the next couple of days. Iman visited her during this time and tried to feed her but was unsuccessful. Imani passed away on October 28, 2013. By the time Imani perished, she was severely underweight, with Dr. Staffenberg describing her as, quote, more or less skin and bones. She was 10 years old but weighed only 32 pounds, the weight of the average 3-year-old. Additionally, her organs were found at autopsy to be very small. On October 28th, Moss called Iman at work to tell him that Imani was deceased. Iman testified at trial that when he came home from work, the family seemed normal with the children playing and Moss watching TV. He found his daughter lying on a blanket on her bedroom floor. He told his wife they should call the police, though she insisted they couldn't because she would lose her children. Moss told Iman they needed to hide Imani's body and quote-unquote be on her criminal mind. Iman wrapped Imani's body with blankets and moved her to the computer room. The couple kept Imani's body in their apartment for several days and their lives largely went back to normal. Iman testified at trial that he would go to work and spend time at home with Imani's body grieving. The Moss couple agreed to cover up Imani's demise. The day after Imani's demise, Moss went to Anna Lennon's and bought new sheets and a new coverall, as the ones Imani had used were covered with excrement and urine. Moss suggested burying Imani and reporting her as a runaway. Iman went to Walmart and bought a galvanized trash can, trash bags, charcoal, and lighter fluid. On Halloween, Moss and Iman decided to put Imani's body in the trash can and burn it. When they tried to place her in the trash can, they found that she was stiff with rigor mortis and used duct tape to compress her body. Iman covered her with a comforter. The Mosses then stuffed Imani's body in the trash bag. Then, in the early morning of November 1st, the Moss couple put the trash can containing Imani's body in the back of the car and took their children to find a place to burn it. They found a secluded location to commit the arson and remove the trash can from the vehicle. They added charcoal briquettes to the bottom of the can, doused Imani's body with lighter fluid, and then set it on fire. As the couple watched the body burn, they found out it would not burn to ash, and after about 5 minutes, they extinguished the fire and took the trash can and Imani's body back to the apartment.
I think at this point it's in
E versus Wiggins, W-I-G-G-I-N-S. That is a U.S. Supreme Court case. Stand up and tell me what it is that you want to address on an ex parte basis. You don't have to give away.
Position to know whether it is proper or not. That's the whole point.
By the foreperson. Please give it to counsel for their review as to form, sir.
The investigation begins. The day after attempting to burn Imani's body, Iman went to work with Imani's body still in the back of his car. He confessed to a friend about the crime. The friend urged him to call the police. Iman thought about it, and after coming home from his second job, he decided to contact the police. At 4 a.m., he made the call, saying he was going to take his own life. Iman informed Moss about his call to the police. Upon learning that the police had been called, Moss placed the trash can with Imani's remains in a grassy area at the apartment and fled in the family vehicle with her children. Upon arrival at the apartment, the police were told by Iman that Imani had drunk some chemicals and perished. He claimed that he had panicked and put her body in a trash can outside the apartment and tried to cremate it. Police found the body and did not believe Iman's story, quickly identifying him and his wife as suspects. Iman was arrested almost immediately. Moss dropped her children off at her mother's house and ultimately turned herself in. Iman ultimately confessed to covering up Imani's slaying by reporting her as a runaway and trying to burn her body. In 2015, he pled guilty to felony slaying and concealing a demise. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In exchange, he agreed to testify against Moss, who rejected a plea deal that would have allowed her to be sentenced to life in prison. Iman is currently incarcerated at the Smith State Prison in Glenville, Georgia. The case against Moss instead went to trial. Trial and sentence. Moss's trial began on April 15, 2019, and the jury consisted of 6 men and 6 women. Moss, who was appointed lawyers through the state office of the Capital Defender, decided to represent herself despite Judge Hutchinson's efforts to persuade her otherwise. Instead of representing her, her defense attorneys served as standby attorneys to answer any legal questions. During pre-trial hearings and jury selection, Judge Hutchinson urged Moss to rely upon the standby counsel, but she refused. Moss did not give an opening statement, nor did she cross-examine any witnesses or give a closing argument.
The 84 case was, I believe, presented to me.
Some certain situations, I guess, as far as
outrageously or wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman, in that it involved torture of the victim. Correct?
Correct.
Is it unanimous?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
Has it been signed by your foreperson?
District Attorney Danny Porter and Assistant District Attorney Lisa Jones called 18 witnesses, including Imani's aunt, grandmother, and a teacher. The attorneys also called Iman and Dr. Staffenberg, the medical examiner who performed an autopsy on Imani's body. Before her demise, Imani went to school, and there she tried telling teachers but was too afraid, and hearing her teachers and grandmother speak of her, it always seemed Imani wanted to make people happy. Imani's teachers, family, friends, and anyone who came to know her described her as just precious. Lisa Neal, Imani's 4th grade teacher at Bethesda Elementary School, testified at Tiffany's trial that, quote, "Imani was precious and it was a blessing to have her in my classroom. She was a wonderful friend to every student, even a student that bullied her she tried so hard to be friends with on a daily basis." On April 29th, Moss was convicted on all 6 counts, including 1 count of malice slaying, 2 counts of felony slaying, 2 counts of cruelty to children, and 1 count of concealing a demise. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. During the sentencing phase, Moss declined to address the jury, present mitigating evidence, or have her relatives who had attended the trial testify on her behalf. She also refused to make a closing statement. In the state's closing argument, Porter argued that Moss did not deserve a life sentence, whether it be a life sentence with parole or a life sentence without parole. She should not be given the opportunity to be released, he argued, because she would never change. Quote, "She's shown you too much of her capacity for cruelty. There will always be that dark side waiting to come out," unquote. He also argued that for Moss, life without parole would not be a worse sentence than perishing because she did not regret her crimes and would never be bothered by them. After closing arguments, the jury began deliberating. After the first day, they appeared conflicted and were told by Judge Hutchinson to go home and quote-unquote sleep on it. They continued deliberations the next day and ultimately agreed on the capital penalty as a punishment for Moss. Judge Hutchinson agreed with the jury's recommendation and sentenced Moss, then aged 36, to perish by lethal injection. Moss was the first person to be sentenced to the capital punishment in Georgia in over 5 years. Judge Hutchinson scheduled her punishment for between June 7th and 14th, 2019. The punishment did not occur during the June 7 to 14 timeframe due to the appeals process, which resulted in an automatic stay being applied to the initial scheduled date. She is currently incarcerated at Arundel State Prison and is Georgia's only female NRO inmate. If Moss is eventually put down, she will be the 3rd woman in Georgia to be put down since 1945. The first was Lena Baker, an African-American maid who, in 1944, was sentenced to the capital punishment by an all-white, all-male jury for the demise of a man she said held her against her will, threatened her life, and appeared poised to hit her with a metal bar. Georgia's parole board posthumously pardoned Baker 60 years after her punishment, finding that it, quote, was a grievous error to deny her clemency, unquote. The second was Kelly Gissendaner, who was put down in 2015 for conspiring with her boyfriend to have her husband slain in 1997. Despite representing herself at trial, Moss accepted legal representation in her appeal. Soon after she was sentenced to her demise, the Georgia Capital Defender Group filed a motion asking for a new trial, arguing, among other things, that Moss was not competent to act as her own attorney. According to her attorneys, Moss was neuropsychological testing data that showed the defendant to have damage to the premotor and prefrontal regions of the brain. A status hearing regarding the motion was held on August 23, 2019, but it could not save her from paying for her sins. The aftermath. Iman and Mas, who remained married, lost custody of their 2 children after Imani's slaying. The children were sent to live with foster parents. The Mas couple, along with both Mas and Iman's mothers, tried to gain custody. In 2019, Porter told local news that the children were adopted by their foster parents. The couple's son, who was 3 years old when Imani was slain, reportedly did have some memories of the crime. However, according to Porter, at the time of the interview in April 2019, the children were doing great and may never know what have happened. Imani's slaying led to criticisms of and systematic changes in Georgia's child welfare system. After the slaying, an intake case manager, a social services administrator, and a program assistant at the GDFCS were all terminated. Others were reportedly disciplined. The slaying led to the department to enact reforms, including deeper investigations into allegations of harm and changing how it assembles maltreatment reports. New case managers and supervisors were hired, reducing caseloads. Agency workers no longer decide whether reports warrant investigations based entirely on information gathered over the telephone. Additionally, no case is assigned a less serious, lower priority status until a caseworker meets a child who allegedly has been harmed and neglected. After Imani's demise, along with several others, the Child Welfare Reform Council was commissioned by Governor Nathan Deal. In January 2015, the council released a report with recommendations on ways to improve Georgia's child welfare system. In 2018, Imani's grandmother Robin filed a lawsuit in the Gwinnett County State Court against the GDFCS, arguing that caseworkers were aware of deteriorating conditions and harm in the Moss family and could have acted earlier. Robin is also suing the Department of Human Services. She's seeking a jury trial and reasonable compensatory damages. According to the lawsuit, there were multiple occasions where the department could have investigated the Moss household and intervened on behalf of Imani. As a result of the negligence of DFCS and its agents, Imani suffered constant harm and deprivation from 2008 until her untimely demise. The lawsuit also states, as a direct and proximate result of defendant's wrongful conduct, plaintiff is entitled to recover for the wrongful demise of Imani, including the full value of the economic and non-economic value of her life had she lived.
Was convicted of a heinous crime, intentionally starving her helpless stepdaughter and burning the child's body.
Georgia versus Tiffany Nicole Moss. Count 1, findings of jury as to alleged statutory aggravating circumstances.
When the incident happened, I called 911. And when I didn't, I put myself in a bad bind.
The case that was cited by standby counsel, which is McCaskill, MCKASKL.
What went wrong? Cases of child neglect leading to a demise are undeniably one of the most horrific and tragic occurrences that can happen in our society. These heart-wrenching incidents highlight the profound failure of our collective responsibility to protect and care for the most vulnerable members of our communities. They reveal a disturbing truth about the callousness that can exist within our society, reflecting a deep-seated disregard for the well-being and lives of innocent children. When a child falls victim to neglect, it is a grave indication of systemic and individual failures. Neglect, in its essence, is a form of abandonment where basic needs such as nourishment, shelter, healthcare, and emotional support are denied. Children who rely entirely on the care and provision of adults are left defenseless and exposed to unimaginable harm. Their well-being and survival depend on the adults in their lives, making it our collective duty to ensure their safety. The tragic demise resulting from child neglect like Imani's serves as a stark reminder of the many ways in which our society has become callous. It reveals the erosion of empathy and compassion, as well as the breakdown of community and familial bonds. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our priorities, values, and the alarming indifference that can pervade our lives. Such cases lay bare the profound neglect not only by immediate caregivers but also by those who may have had an opportunity to intervene. Family, neighbors, teachers, and community members all play a vital role in safeguarding our children, and their failure to recognize the signs of neglect or to report concerns contributes to the dire outcomes. This collective failure amplifies the tragedy, emphasizing the need for greater awareness, education, and proactive intervention. The repercussions of such intense child neglect and harm are far-reaching and devastating. The loss of a child's life leaves an indelible void impacting not only their immediate family but also the wider community. The ripple effects of such a profound tragedy are immeasurable and may be felt for generations to come. The pain, grief, and trauma experienced by those affected are profound and long-lasting, forever altering the course of their lives. Moreover, these cases expose the flaws in our child protection systems and highlight the urgent need for reform. They reveal the inadequacy of existing policies, procedures, and resources meant to ensure the safety and well-being of children. It is a wake-up call for society to reevaluate its commitment to safeguarding children, demanding an overhaul of child protection services, enhanced training for professionals, and increased support for families in crisis. Ultimately, cases like Imani's serve as a grim reminder of our collective responsibility as a society. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our capacity for indifference and the dire consequences of failing to prioritize the safety and well-being of our children. It is a call to action, a plea for change, and a reminder that the most vulnerable members of our society deserve our utmost care, protection, and love.
In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Palm Beach County, a horrifying crime unfolded that would send shock waves through the community. At the center of this dark tale is a man named Marlon Joseph, whose name would become synonymous with the heinous double murder that shattered the lives of two innocent victims and forever scarred their loved ones. It was in the year 2017 when tragedy struck the Crowell Inglet household. Kalada Crowell, a vibrant and loving mother, and her 11-year-old daughter, Kyra Inglet, were brutally taken from this world in an act of unimaginable violence. The news of their deaths spread like wildfire, casting a pall of sorrow and fear over the once serene neighborhood. Marlon Joseph, a resident of Palm Beach County, emerged as a prime suspect in this chilling crime. The very notion that a member of their own community could be responsible for such a heinous act left the residents bewildered and seeking answers. How could someone who walked among them be capable of such a brutal and heartless act? As the details of the case began to unfold, the sinister nature of the crime revealed itself. It appeared that on that fateful day, a sense of festering anger had consumed Marlon Joseph, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the lives of those involved. The tranquil home on the peaceful 3rd Street would soon become a haunting crime scene, forever etched in the memories of all who witnessed the aftermath. Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet, both full of life and dreams, fell victim to a violence that defied comprehension. The innocence of Kyra's youth and the love of a mother taken away in an instant, leaving an irreplaceable void in the lives of their grieving family members. The shock and disbelief reverberated throughout the community as friends, neighbors, and even strangers grappled with the cold reality of the crime that had occurred in their midst. The sense of security they once cherished was shattered, replaced by an undercurrent of fear and suspicion. Marlon Joseph's name became synonymous with evil, evoking a mix of anger, sorrow, and a thirst for justice among those who sought to understand how such a tragedy could have unfolded. As his trial commenced, the courtroom was filled with intense anticipation as the community eagerly awaited the unfolding of events that would bring forth the truth and deliver the justice they so desperately sought.
Marlon, if you're watching, son, just please turn yourself in.
Robin Denson is Marlon Joseph's mother. She is also the girlfriend of victim Kalada Crowell, and she says she will not eat until her son turns himself in.
I just want to just tell you, I'm going to be there for you, Marlon. I just told my family, until Marlon turned himself in, I would not.
Family that may be scared to turn him in. They say you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously.
The case of Marlon Joseph and the double murder of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet remains etched in the annals of Palm Beach County's history. It serves as a grim reminder that darkness can lurk in the most unexpected places, even within the seemingly idyllic confines of a close-knit community. As the trial proceeded, the chilling details of the crime would come to light, exposing the depths of human depravity and the devastating impact it leaves in its wake. The path to justice would be a winding and treacherous one, rife with legal complexities, emotional turmoil, and the unwavering determination of those who sought to bring closure to the grieving families. Marlon Joseph's story is not just one of crime and punishment, but also a reflection of the resilience and strength of the community that rallied together in the face of tragedy. It is a tale that serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, the horrors that can lurk beneath the surface, and the enduring pursuit of justice in the face of unimaginable loss. The journey to uncover the truth, to hold accountable those responsible, and to find solace in the aftermath of unspeakable tragedy would test the resolve of the community and the justice system. The story of Marlon Joseph and the double murder case serves as a somber reminder that evil can reside even in the most unassuming corners of society, leaving scars that may never fully heal. As the trial progressed, the eyes of the community remained fixated on the courtroom, seeking closure, hoping for justice, and praying that the memory of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet would be forever honored by the deliverance of a just outcome. The Palm Beach County community forever changed this grim chapter in its history, stood united in its determination to bring the perpetrator to justice and to ensure that the memory of the victims would never fade away. The tale of Marlon Joseph and the double murder case serves as a chilling reminder that even within the confines of a seemingly peaceful neighborhood, darkness can lurk, waiting to strike. It is a story that echoes in the hearts of those touched by the tragedy, forever reminding them of the preciousness of life, the depths of human cruelty, and the strength of a community bound together in the face of adversity. The brutal murders. As the harrowing details of the double murder emerge, the true extent of the brutality inflicted upon Kalada Crowell and her young daughter, Kyra Inglet, send shock waves through the community. Their peaceful shared residence became the backdrop for a crime scene that revealed a level of savagery that defied comprehension. The tragedy unfolded as a series of merciless gunshots that tore through the air, leaving in their wake a trail of devastation and heartbreak. Kalada Crowell, a loving mother with dreams and aspirations, became the primary target of the attacker's fury. The echoes of the shots that struck her body reverberated with the weight of the unspeakable violence that had befallen her. The wounds inflicted upon Kalada were numerous, a chilling testament to the relentless and cold-blooded nature of the attack. Each gunshot carried with it the unimaginable pain and horror that would forever haunt those who bore witness to the aftermath. The first bullet found its mark in Kalada's hand, an instinctive gesture of self-defense that ultimately proved futile against the unrelenting force of evil that had invaded her home. The onslaught continued as the attacker callously fired shots into Kalada's belly, causing excruciating agony that must have ripped through her being. The brutality escalated further as the assailant targeted her calf, leaving yet another searing wound that served as a physical manifestation of the malevolence that had taken hold.
It's a feeling of numbness tonight, knowing that their cousin's killer will be sentenced to death.
Of her own child, and then chasing that child out in the street like a dog and shooting her 5 times, I believe it was. When you commit an offense like that, you are the poster child for the death penalty.
Joseph was convicted several months longer. If there are appeals, it could be decades before an execution.
But the relentless barrage did not end there. A bullet tore through Kalada's chest, further ravaging her already traumatized body. The culmination of this unspeakable act of violence came in the form of a fatal shot to her forehead, a single bullet that shattered bone and pierced the delicate recesses of her brain. In an instant, a vibrant life was extinguished, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. Tragically, young Kara Inglet, just 11 years old and filled with promise of a future yet to unfold, was not spared from the attacker's wrath. She too fell victim to the hailstorm of violence that engulfed their home. The perpetrator's callousness showed no bounds as bullets found their mark in Kyra's innocent body. The first gunshot struck her buttock, a cruel twist of fate that initiated a chain of events leading to the catastrophic loss that would follow. Another bullet pierced her lower back, inflicting unimaginable pain on a child who should have been shielded from such horrors. And then the final blow came in the form of a gunshot to the back of Kyra's head, forever silencing her youthful laughter and extinguishing the dreams that had danced in her vibrant imagination. The physical wounds sustained by Kalada's Crowell and Kyra Inglet were not merely marks on their bodies. They were a chilling testament to the depths of human cruelty and the devastating consequences that follow. The bullets that penetrated their flesh forever scarred their loved ones, leaving behind a pain that would endure long after the echoes of the gunshots had faded. The brutal murders of Kalada Crowell and Kara Inglet etched a dark stain on the fabric of their community. Their lives were unjustly extinguished, leaving behind grieving family members and a community grappling with the anguish of such senseless violence. The scars left by these heinous acts serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the profound impact that acts as cruelty can have on the human spirit. The memory of Kalada and Kyra will forever be held in the hearts of those who mourn their loss, serving a constant reminder of the need for justice and the urgent call to protect the sanctity of every life. Marlon Joseph's conviction. In the hushed courtroom, anticipation hung in the air like a heavy fog at the fate of Marlon Joseph, the man accused of the brutal murders of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet, rested in the hands of the jury. Every eye in the room was fixed on the 12 individuals tasked with delivering a verdict that would undermine the course of justice. Months of investigation, arduous legal proceedings, and heart-wrenching testimonies had led to this pivotal moment. The weight of the evidence and the emotions of the families converge, creating an atmosphere charged with raw intensity. The time had come for the jury to render their judgment, to decide whether Marlon Joseph was indeed guilty of the unfathomable crimes that had torn apart the lives of two innocent victims. As the jurors retired to the confines of their deliberation room, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The fate of Marlon Joseph hung in the balance, and the community yearned for closure, for the assurance that justice would prevail. Hours turned into agonizing eternity as the jurors pored over the evidence, dissecting every detail and wrestling with the weight of their responsibility. Finally, the doors of the deliberation room swung open and the jury re-entered the courtroom, their faces etched with a blend of solemnity and resolution. Each step they took resonated with the gravity of their task, the weight of the lives affected by their decision.
In the last few minutes that Marlon Joseph, a man wanted for murder, is in custody.
The court further finds that it would impose these sentences irrespective of whether one or more of the aggravator forfeited your right to live at all. Accordingly, it is hereby ordered and adjudged you shall be executed in the method provided by Florida law. You shall receive credit pronounced for count 1, and therefore there is no credit for time served on count 2. Further imposes all mandatory court costs pursuant to Florida statutes, and those will be entered as.
The room fell into a hushed silence as the jury foreperson stood, their voice breaking the stillness. We, the jury, find the defendant Marlon Joseph guilty first-degree murder. A collective breath seemed to escape the room, mingling relief with a profound sense of grief. The families of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet, though burdened with immeasurable pain, found solace in the knowledge that the man responsible for the heinous crime would be held accountable. For Marlon Joseph, The weight of the guilty verdict settled upon him, casting a shadow over his future. The ramification of his actions had finally caught up with him, sealing his fate and condemning him to face the consequences of his monstrous deeds. The conviction of Marlon Joseph brought a sense of closure to the community that had been rocked by the tragic events. It was a bittersweet victory, a step towards healing, but one that could never fully erase the scars left by the brutal acts of violence that had forever altered their lives. As the courtroom emptied, a collective sigh of relief echoed through the hallways. The wheels of justice had turned, delivering a resounding message that such acts of cruelty would not go unanswered. The guilty verdict became a symbol of hope, a testament to the resilience of a community that had stood strong in the face of unimaginable loss. Death sentence imposed. Following Marlon Joseph's conviction for first-degree murder in the deaths of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet, Circuit Judge Cheryl Caracuzo imposed the death sentence. The decision was made after considering the jury's unanimous recommendation. Marlon Joseph became the first Palm Beach County resident in 18 years to be sentenced to death row. Judge Caracuzo based her decision on the evidence presented during the trial, which established Joseph's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The death sentence signifies the gravity of the crimes committed by Joseph. It reflects the court's determination that murders of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet were particularly heinous, deserving of the harshest punishment available under the law. Judge Caracuzo's decision prompted discussions and debates within the community about the use of capital punishment. Some viewed the death sentence as a just consequence for Joseph's actions, emphasizing the need for justice and accountability in cases of such brutality. Others raised concerns about the ethics and effectiveness of the death penalty as a deterrent or a means of achieving justice. The families of Kalada Crowell and Kyra Inglet, while coping with immeasurable grief, found some solace in the court's decision.
But can you please just turn yourself in? If you're scared, because since day one, he would bring me to you, Marlon. I also want justice for Kalada and Kyra. You know both of them meant the world to me. You know.
Are posting a reward up to $5,000 for the arrest of Marlon Joseph. We'd like to get that out to the scene in a gray Camry. This flyer is going to be given to all the media right here. It has the numbers to call. Also, Marlon, if you're out there and you want to call these agents directly to turn yourself in.
The imposed death sentence provided a sense of closure and acknowledgement of devastating loss they had suffered. Marlon Joseph, now facing the prospect of life on death row, will endure a lengthy legal process, including appeals and further proceedings. The imposition of the death sentence marked a significant turning point in his journey through the criminal justice system. Palm Beach County, impacted by this high-profile case, experienced the sobering realization that such acts of violence can strike close to home. The community grappled with the profound consequences of Joseph's actions, reflecting on the need for measures to prevent future tragedies and promote a safer society. The imposition of the death sentence upon Marlon Joseph serves as a reminder of the complex and challenging nature of the justice system. It highlights the enduring questions surrounding capital punishment and its role in society, provoking ongoing discussions about its merits, drawbacks, and alternatives. Defense's arguments. In a courtroom charged with tension and emotion, Marlon Joseph's defense attorney Fred Susanek rose to challenge the severity of the crimes that had cast a dark shadow over the proceedings. With unwavering conviction, he embarked on a mission to dismantle the prosecution's case and advocate for a different outcome. Susanek's fervent argument centered on the assertion that the murders did not satisfy the criteria of being heinous, atrocious, and cruel, a threshold that, according to the defense, warranted a less severe penalty. He implored the court to reconsider the imposition of death sentence, emphasizing the potential for a miscarriage of justice and the need for a fresh opportunity to uncover the truth. With an unwavering determination, Susan X sought to dismantle the prosecution's case brick by brick. He meticulously examined the evidence, aiming to expose any inconsistencies or doubts that may have tainted the foundation upon which the guilty verdict was built. His impassioned plea echoed through the courtroom, urging the courtroom to overturn the convictions and sentence and grant Marlon Joseph a chance at redemption through a new trial. Susan X's arguments extended beyond the question of the severity of the crimes. He contended that multiple mistakes had been made during the trial, asserting that they had contributed what we perceive as an unjust outcome. He highlighted alleged errors in the proceedings, challenging the admissibility of certain evidence and questioning the fairness of the trial process itself. One key point of contention revolved around the admission of testimony regarding Joseph's warning to Kyra Inglet, indicating that he would give her one more chance to correct her behavior.
Joseph to Lake Worth. They say no one gave them any tips. They used investigative work to. At the same time, the victim's family is relieved he's finally behind bars.
The grace of God, they caught the person who did it.
And it's sad. It's sad. That's all we always say. It's sad that it happened.
Susan X argued that this warning was not indicative of an intention to commit murder and that similar admonishments were commonplace among parents. He sought to undermine the significance of this warning, suggesting that it had been unfairly leveraged to sway the jury's perception of Joseph's culpability. Throughout his argument, Susan X passionately advocated for a reconsideration of the convictions and sentence imposed upon his client. He probed the boundaries of the law, challenging the severity of the punishment and emphasizing the importance of a fair and impartial trial. His words reverberated through the courtroom, leaving an indelible impression on all those who bore witness to his impassioned plea for justice. As the defense's arguments echoed through the hallowed halls of the courtroom, they kindled a flicker of doubt in the minds of some observers. The case, which had seemed to be clear-cut instance of unfathomable violence, now stood on a precipice of uncertainty. The defense's persistent challenges invited a deeper reflection on the gravity of the crimes and the appropriateness of the death penalty. In the end, the decision rested with the court, a decision that would shape the trajectory of Marlon Joseph's life and reverberated through the annals of legal history. The arguments put forth by the defense cast a spotlight on the delicate balance between justice and compassion, igniting a fiery debate that would persist long after the gavel fell on the courtroom emptied. Prosecutor's case. Assistant Attorney General Rhonda Giger masterfully wove together the strands of evidence, unraveling Marlon Joseph's threats and motives with compelling clarity. The courtroom listened intently as she skillfully painted a portrait of a man driven by anger and a desire for retribution. Giger presented evidence that Marlon Joseph had issued a warning, ominously indicating that Kyra Inglet had one final chance to mend her behavior. This crucial piece of information shed light on the brewing tensions within the household and provided insight into Joseph's mindset. Giger argued that Joseph's actions were not impulsive but calculated, driven by a deep-seated anger fueled by an argument between Kyra and his own daughter. By meticulously connecting the dots, Giger wove a narrative that left little room for doubt. She emphasized that Joseph made good on his threat, capitalizing on the volatile situation and exacting his revenge in a cruel and heartless manner. The jury was left with a haunting image of Joseph's actions, one that was impossible to ignore. Each with detail presented, Giger skillfully crafted a mosaic of motives and circumstances, aiming to establish a clear and compelling case against Marlon Joseph. By peering into the depths of his anger and uncovering the threads of his intentions, she aimed to leave an indelible impression on the jury's collective conscience. As Giger's arguments reverberated through the courtroom, the weight of the evidence presented became increasingly apparent. The picture that emerged was one of a man driven by anger and a distorted sense of justice, leading to the tragic loss of two innocent lives. The prosecutor's case struck a chord, resonating with the jury and solidifying their belief in Marlon Joseph's guilt. Supreme Court's ruling. After thorough review and consideration, the Florida Supreme Court delivered its ruling, affirming Marlon Joseph's death sentence and first-degree murder convictions. The highest judicial body in the state carefully examined the case, scrutinizing the evidence, the court's rulings, and the jury's verdict. In its deliberations, the Supreme Court focused on determining whether there was substantial and competent evidence to support the convictions. After meticulous analysis, they concluded that the evidence presented during the trial indeed substantiated the jury's verdict of guilt. The court emphasized that the jury had carefully weighed the facts and rendered a unanimous decision based on the weights of the evidence presented.
How this was a hard-working mother, a TSA officer at MIA, and you tonight, you said it,
shot and killed him a week ago. Tonight, new information on what happened last Thursday, according to detectives along 3rd Street.
And according to this arrest report, Joseph didn't like Kyra's attitude.
Furthermore, the Supreme Court deemed the trial court's rulings to be sound and in accordance with the law. They found that the trial court had properly considered the aggravating and mitigating circumstances and had exercised its discretion in imposing the death sentence. The court acknowledged the gravity of the crimes committed and concluded that the punishment was justified within the legal framework. Controversies and mistakes. Throughout the trial, the defense raised several concerns regarding potential mistakes and injustices that they believed tainted the proceedings. These contentions added fuel to the controversy surrounding the case, further complicating the quest for a fair and just resolution. One of the key issues raised by the defense was the admission of certain evidence that they argued should have been excluded from the trial. They contended that the jury should not have been allowed to hear certain information, such as Marlon Joseph's warning to Kyra Inglet, which they claimed was not indicative of an intention to commit murder. Additionally, the defense argued that similar warnings given by parents to their children should not be misconstrued as evidence of murderous intent. Another point of contention was the surprise witness testimony introduced by the prosecution. The defense argued that this witness should not have been allowed to testify, as the defense had not been adequately informed in advance. They asserted that this surprise testimony deprived them of the opportunity to present their own expert to challenge the assertions made by the witness. The defense claimed that this omission undermined their ability to provide a robust and comprehensive defense. These alleged mistakes and controversy surrounding the trial procedures added an additional layer of complexity to an already emotionally charged case.
And in combination with each other, more than sufficient to justify a sentence of death. As to the court then undertook the weighing of the proven aggravating factors against the established mitigating circumstances. Moreover, this court recognizes it must give great weight to the jury's recommendations presented. This court finds the aggravating factors heavily outweigh the mitigating circumstances.
They serve as a focal points for the defense's argument that the outcome was unjust, as they believe that these factors had contributed to an unfair trial and ultimately an unfavorable verdict for Marlon Joseph. As the legal battle moved forward, the controversies and alleged mistakes continued to stir debate among legal experts, scholars, and the public at large. The competing narratives and differing interpretations of the trial proceedings further underscored the importance of a thorough and impartial examination of the case. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos was born in Rochester, Michigan to a troubled family. Her father, Leo Dale Pittman, was a convicted child molester who ended herself in prison. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, was an alcoholic who abandoned her children when Eileen was a child. Her grandparents raised Eileen, but she was often harmed and neglected. As a teenager, Wuornos ran away from home and became involved in body work.
And that's a hell of a lot of men I went through before the next jerk came along and I used protection.
Killings all began like this. A middle-aged man pulled over to pick up Lee Wuornos. You killed 7 men, 7 strangers. Does that not make you a serial killer?
So I didn't kill them every day, did I?
The way Lee tells it, she was just a hooker trying to turn a trick, and the men knew it.
She also struggled with mental illness, including borderline personality disorder and dissociative identity disorder. In 1989, Wuornos began slaying her male clients. Between December 1989 and September 1990, the bodies of 7 men were found along the highways of northern and central Florida. Items belonging to 2 victims were pawned near Daytona Beach, and the alias names used were traced to Wuornos through thumbprints left on the pawn shop cards. Wuornos confessed to slaying all 6 men. She claimed she acted in self-defense, as the men had physically attacked or attempted to attack and exploit her. In one of the cases, evidence was found that the culprit may have tried to attack her. However, the evidence in other cases against her was strong, and she was convicted of 6 slayings. Within 2 weeks of her arrest, Wuornos and her attorney had sold movie rights to her story. The case resulted in several books, movies, and even one opera. The court sentenced Wuornos to the ending row in each case, where she met her demise in 2002.
Did I go out there every day and say, I'm gonna kill? If I did, there would
Well,
be
no,
hundreds.
it took you 12 months.
Yeah.
Last day of her miserable life on the road here, ordering her first beer at 11 in the morning. Self-defense.
Yeah.
Lee, the first one, perhaps, the second maybe, but
So what?
7 times?
Number 13. Carla Faye Tucker. Carla Tucker was born in Houston, Texas in 1959. She had a troubled childhood marked by harm and neglect. She dropped out of school in the 10th grade and began using drugs and alcohol. She also became involved in body work. In 1983, Tucker and a male accomplice, Daniel Ryan Garrett, broke into an apartment in Houston.
And the tension and the pressure build, and it will continue to build as we get closer. And it's kind of terrifying in many respects. Different person than she was in 1983, and if you sit down with Carla Faye Tucker, it's very difficult not to be touched by her.
That we had to say goodbye, and that got a little hard. She said one of the most beautiful prayers that I've ever heard.
With a pickaxe, they attacked the 2 occupants, Jerry Lynn Dean and Deborah Ann Thornton. Dean and Thornton tried to fight back but were both slain. Tucker was arrested and charged with the slaying. During the trial, she accepted a bargain, pleaded guilty to slaying Dean, and testified against her accomplice. Though the capital penalty was hardly ever sought for female slayers, Tucker and Garrett were sentenced to the ending row in late 1984. Number 12. Barbara Elaine Wood Graham. Graham was born Barbara Elaine Ford in Oakland, California, to Hortense Ford, who earned her living through body work. When Barbara was 2, her mother was still in her late teens and was sent to reform school. Barbara was raised by strangers and extended family. As a teenager, she was arrested for vagrancy and sentenced to serve time at the same reform school where her mother had been. Released in 1939, Barbara tried to make a new start for herself. She married thrice, but all her attempts at domesticity failed. Barbara then took up body work. She soon became involved in gambling and illegal drug circles, cultivating several friends who were ex-convicts and known career criminals. In March 1953, Barbara joined her associates in robbing Mabel Monahan. Barbara reportedly gained entry by asking to use her phone. The gang demanded money and jewels from Monahan, but the 64-year-old widow refused to give them anything. At this point, according to the statement and testimony of John True, Barbara began viciously pistol whipping Mrs. Monahan, cracking her skull, and then suffocating her with a pillow. One of her associates was later arrested on a separate charge and confessed to robbing Mrs. Monahan. An undercover officer attempted to cozy up with her, got her to admit what she had done, and then arrested her. Graham was convicted and sentenced to the end row. Number 11. Emilia Carr. Emilia Lily Carr was born to a troubled family. At age 15, she disclosed harm by her father to her school but later withdrew her statement. Her father was also later arrested and imprisoned for attempting to hire someone to slay his family. In November 2008, Carr got engaged to Joshua Damian Fulgham, who married someone else, Heather Strong, a month later. However, Carr maintained contact with them and babysat Strong's children, according to Carr's family. Carr and Fulgham continued their relationship while Strong began seeing someone else. In February 2009, Heather Strong disappeared while working at an Iron Skillet restaurant at a petrol gas station near Interstate Route 75 in Reddick, Florida. Her remains were discovered on March 19, buried in a shallow grave near McIntosh, Florida, next to a storage trailer.
Yes, I was shaking so bad.
Call it death row?
No, we call it life row. It's life row.
Life row? Why?
Because we're not dying, we're living. It's hard to answer because it's like I wasn't where all that happened. A desire to make women look so bad in the media, you know?
Carr was arrested on March 24 after authorities noticed her frequent statements without an attorney present. Undercover audio recordings of Carr discussing details of the crime with Fulgham's sister further incriminated her. The evidence showed that Carr tricked Strong into the storage trailer at her mother's home, placed a plastic bag over her head, and attempted to break her neck. Strong eventually died from asphyxiation while bound to a chair with a duct tape. The motive was jealousy, as Carr viewed Strong as a rival in her affections for Fulgham. During the trial, the prosecutor filed notice of intent to pursue the capital penalty due to the heinous nature of the crime. The jury found Carr guilty after only 2.5 hours of deliberation. Number 10. Wanda Jean Allen. Wanda Jean Allen was the first woman of color to be sentenced to the end row in the United States. Wanda Jean Allen and Gloria Leathers were a lesbian couple who shared a house in the Village at 2245 Hasley. Any officer on patrol had been dispatched to that address for a domestic dispute at least once or twice. The two had met in prison in 1982. Sometime later, after both were released from the jail, the two moved into Allen's house. On December 1, 1988, the stormy relationship came to a violent and deadly conclusion. Allen and Leathers had engaged in an altercation in the morning where cops had been dispatched. Later that day, Leathers told Allen that their relationship was over and she was moving out. While hastily helping to pack her daughter's belongings, Gloria's mother heard Allen threaten to slay Gloria. Just after 3 o'clock that afternoon, as Leathers walked up the drive of the police department to file a complaint against Allen, officers inside the department heard what sounded like a gunshot. They ran outside to see Allen holding a weapon and fleeing the scene. Paramedics rushed to the scene and attempted to help Leathers, but she later passed away. Allen was arrested a few days later in Duncan, Oklahoma, after one of her relatives called the Crime Stoppers hotline to report her whereabouts and collect the reward for her capture. Allen was tried, convicted, and sentenced to the ending row. Number 9. Krista Pike. Krista Gale Pike was born in West Virginia on March 10, 1976. Her mother would drink while pregnant with Krista, and doctors later said this likely contributed to an underdeveloped brain. Her parents didn't want to be involved in her life, and she was given to her grandmother. But when her grandmother passed away, Krista went to live with her mother, who didn't care for her. Pike lived a troubled life growing up. After dropping out of high school, Krista joined the Job Corps, where she met her then-boyfriend, Tedderell Shipp. Krista grew jealous of a 19-year-old university-goer, Colleen Slemmer, whom Krista believed to be involved with Tedderell, which fueled her anger and led to a violent confrontation. On January 12, 1995, Pike and her accomplices lured Colleen to an isolated area on campus. They attacked her, beat her with a rock, and used a box cutter to carve a pentagram into her chest. Pike smashed Colleen's skull and kept a piece of it, later showing it around campus. The authorities quickly apprehended Pike and her accomplices. In March 1996, Krista Pike stood trial for the slaying of Colleen Slemmer. She was convicted and sentenced to capital punishment, becoming the youngest woman in the United States to receive the capital penalty. Number 8. Taylor Renee Parker. A Texas woman convicted of slaying a pregnant woman and ripping out her unborn baby has been sentenced to the capital punishment, a fitting punishment for the heinous crime. A jury of 6 men and 6 women in Bowie County deliberated for less than 2 hours before handing down the fatal sentence for 29-year-old Taylor Renee Parker. Parker was convicted of capital slaying for the ghastly slaughter of Reagan Michelle Simmons Hancock, 21 years old, and her infant daughter in New Boston in October 2020. Simmons Hancock's mother, Jessica Brooks, called Parker an evil piece of flesh demon. In the 10 months leading up to the slaying, Parker had faked her own pregnancy in an elaborate scheme to prevent her boyfriend from leaving her, prosecutors said. She wore pregnancy disguises, fake ultrasounds, posted about pregnancy online, and even threw a gender reveal party for the fake baby. Parker, who could not conceive after a hysterectomy, told her boyfriend she would be induced to deliver the baby on the day of the slaying. Prosecutors said she intensively researched how to fake a pregnancy and watched numerous videos on delivering babies preterm at 35 weeks, which is how far along Simmons Hancock was when she was slain. On the morning of October 9, 2020, Parker crushed Simmons Hancock's skull with a hammer and knifed her more than 100 times in her home before removing her baby from her womb with a scalpel. Parker fled with the infant, a girl who later perished. After her sentencing, Parker was to be moved to the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, where the state houses its female row inmates. Number 7. Darlie Lynn Peck Routier. Darlie Routier, a full-time mother from Rolette, Texas, lived with her young 2 sons, Devon and Damon. On June 6, 1996, she contacted emergency services, claiming that an invader had infiltrated her home and knifed her along with her 2 children. Her elder son, Devon, age 6, managed to live, but the younger Damon, age 2, succumbed to his injuries. Darlie was transported to the hospital with serious injuries to her arm and throat, allegedly from warding off the attacker. However, law enforcement found no signs of forced entry or any evidence supporting her claim of an intruder, including fingerprints or footprints. The sole weapon discovered on the premises was a knife from Darlie's own kitchen. Subsequently, Darlie was apprehended on 2 charges of capital slaying. A grand jury indictment followed, and the prosecution proceeded on the charge concerning the slaying of Damon, her younger child, which made a capital punishment sentence feasible given his tender age. Darlie's trial began in 1997. The prosecution posited that Darlie had slain her sons in a rage after an extramarital affair came to light. They highlighted her lack of defensive wounds and inconsistencies in her story, including changing clothes post the incident. Conversely, the defense insisted on Darlie being a victim of home invasion, arguing she had repelled the attacker in self-defense. They also claimed the prosecution's case was speculative, devoid of any tangible evidence connecting Darlie to the slayings. The jury pronounced Darlie guilty of capital slaying, sentencing her fatally. She remains on the row. Number 6. Lisa Marie Montgomery. Lisa Marie Montgomery was held guilty for the horrifying slaying of Bobby Joe Stinnett in 2004. In a gruesome incident, Montgomery butchered the pregnant Stinnett, extracted her unborn baby from her womb, and abducted the baby. The crime was instigated through an online interaction on a rat terrier chat room, Ratter Chatter, where Montgomery, posing as Darlene Fisher, claimed to be pregnant as well and bonded with Stinnett over their supposed pregnancies. She then scheduled a meeting at Stinnett's residence under the ruse of purchasing a rat terrier.
Lisa told me that she cut the cord, held it between her fingers, put the baby inside her coat.
She doesn't get that opportunity to hold her baby because that woman took that right away from her.
This was not a spontaneous fit of anger or rage. This was meticulously planned out.
I can't even comprehend what Bobby's family went through.
On December 16, 2004, Montgomery went forth with a brutal crime. She strangled Stinnett with a pink neon rope at her home in Skidmore, Missouri, and surgically removed the premature baby from her womb. Following the act, she attempted to portray the newborn girl as her biological child. Stinnett's mother, Becky Harper, found her daughter in a pool of blood an hour post the attack. She reported the incident to 911, recounting her daughter's injuries as if her stomach had exploded. Stinnett could not be revived by the paramedics and was declared deceased at St. Francis Hospital in Maryville, Missouri. The subsequent day, Montgomery was apprehended at her farmhouse and the infant was recovered. The baby girl, named Victoria Jo Stinnett, was returned to her father, Zeb Stinnett. In her trial, Montgomery was prosecuted under the Federal Kidnapping Act for kidnapping resulting in a demise. She was argued to have pseudocyesis, a mental disorder that leads a woman to falsely assume she is pregnant and displays signs of pregnancy. Renowned neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran suggested her crime resulted from severe pseudocyesis delusion triggered by her traumatic past involving physical exploitation and PTSD. Contrarily, forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz dismissed the theory, deeming Montgomery free of pseudocyesis. After a trial on October 22, 2007, Montgomery was found guilty of slaying. 4 days later, the jury proposed a capital sentence. Montgomery was finally put down by lethal injection on January 13, 2021. Number 5. Lisa Cunningham. Mom of 6, Lisa Cunningham could become the first Australian woman on the row in the United States if she's found guilty over her stepdaughter Sana's demise. Cunningham, 48, has been behind bars in Arizona since she and her husband Jermaine was arrested over the 6-year-old's demise in 2017. They are both charged with 1 count of first-degree slaying and several counts of child harm. They've pleaded not guilty. If the couple is convicted, prosecutors have indicated that they will apply the capital penalty, something Australia strongly opposes. The 48-year-old, who was born and raised in Adelaide, has been waiting for her day in court since her arrest. Sana Cunningham, Jermaine's biological daughter, perished in February 2017. In the months leading to her demise, after she'd turned 6, the family noticed concerning changes in her behavior. She started forgetting basic tasks like opening a door or a water bottle. The family couldn't understand what was happening to their little girl. In July 2016, Sana was diagnosed with acute schizophrenia. Her parents said she had been tearing at her skin and hearing voices urging her to slay. She would urinate and defecate on the floor inside the house and gauge at her eyes. Child safety authorities visited the Cunningham household twice. Cunningham said they watched Sana decline and knew of her condition. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is providing consular assistance to the 48-year-old, and we have yet to see how her case will turn out. Number 4. Pamela Perillo. In February 1980, Linda Fletcher and Mike Brittle, a newlywed couple from California, met Pamela Perillo and soon after they became involved in a robbery. To avoid arrest, the couple fled to Arizona and was later joined by Perillo, who had also had an arrest warrant. They hitchhiked to Texas, where they met Bob Banks, a man relocating his belongings. Banks offered them a ride and a job to help him move, unknowingly setting the scene for a horrific crime. Banks, unaware of the danger, treated his guests to meals and shelter. After observing his wealth and firearm collection, Bridle and Perillo hatched a plot to rob him. On the evening of February 21, 1980, the trio went to a rodeo and a restaurant with Banks, who later returned home with them. At the house, they found Bob Skeens, a friend of Banks who had come to help him move. The following day, Bridle and Perillo planned an ambush, arming themselves with Banks' weapons. When Banks and Skeens returned from a coffee run, they were caught off guard and subdued. Bridle and Perillo tied them up, robbed Banks, and ransacked his bedroom. In an unimaginable act of cruelty, they strangled Banks and Skeens while recording the slaughters, then casually ate the breakfast the victims had brought. After committing the slaying, Bridle, Perillo, and Fletcher fled to Denver, abandoning Skeens' Volkswagen with incriminating evidence inside. When Banks failed to show up at work for 2 days, his supervisor discovered the crime scene. The police investigation and subsequent trials led to Brittle's fatal punishment in 1995, Fletcher's probation, and Perillo's sentencing to life imprisonment plus 30 years for aggravated robbery after her capital sentence was overruled on appeal. Number 3. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio, born June 18, 1969, was the first Hispanic woman sentenced to the capital penalty in Texas. She was convicted of the slaying of her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah. The prosecution claimed the child's bruising and internal injuries resulted from harm and neglect, while the defense attributed them to a fall down the stairs. Lucio's case came under the spotlight in the 2020 documentary, The State of Texas vs. Melissa. Throughout, she maintained her innocence. Her punishment, set for April 27, 2022, was stayed by an appeals court 2 days prior. Number 2. Christina Marie Riggs. Christina Marie Riggs, a licensed nurse, was convicted of slaughter by smothering her 2 preschool-aged children in their beds at the family Sherwood home. On November 4, 1997, Riggs obtained the antidepressant Elavil from her pharmacist, the painkiller morphine, and the toxic potassium chloride from the hospital where she worked. The heart-stopping potassium chloride is the same drug used in the lethal cocktail injected into condemned inmates in the end house. Riggs gave the children a small amount of Elavil to put them to sleep. Then she placed each of the children in their beds. About 10 p.m., she injected 5-year-old Justin with undiluted potassium chloride. But unless it is diluted, the drug causes burning and pain. Justin woke and cried out in terror. She then smothered the boy with a pillow. Number 1. Marilyn K. Plants. Marilyn K. Plants was put down via lethal injection on May 1, 2001 at Oklahoma State Penitentiary for the slaying of her husband, James Earl Plants, in 1988. William Bryson, also sentenced to the capital punishment, was put down in 2000 for his role in the slaying. A third accomplice, Clinton Eugene McKimble, received life imprisonment after pleading guilty and testifying against Plants and Bryson. The case was built around the allegations that Plants had arranged her husband's slaying to claim 2 life insurance policies worth $319,000. James Plants was brutally beaten with baseball bats and subsequently burned in his pickup truck. Marilyn Plants, Bryson, and McKimble were charged with first-degree slaying, with prosecutors pushing for the capital penalty.
Gasoline or something in that order was used, that it burned so hot that the glass actually melted.
There was only 2 people in the house, according to Joyce Cohen, when this homicide occurred.
Tissue that was found on the gun was an exact match to the tissue that I had submitted to the lab.
and one of them ends up dead, you should suspect the other person until your suspicions are relieved.
Plante's punishment made her the second woman to be put down in Oklahoma since 1907. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.